Boom. What's up,
Okay.
y'all? Kernel Arts and Culture Guild Session 3, Future of NFTs. We got an incredible discussion lined up for today. Some incredible speakers that we're going to introduce very shortly. If you don't remember my lovely face, my name is Ben. I'll let Yulia say hello. Hello, Yulia.
Yeah. So we decided to discuss this topic today because I feel it was quite a heated discussion lately. Somebody's talking. Yeah. So like while originally, like I feel a lot of NFT started being about art and experimentation, and it wasn't commercial for quite a long time. Like during last year, the conversation started leaning towards utilities. So that's why we're discussing like what is utility, like what is the potential of NFTs, like art versus utility, and discussing all of it. So yeah. So today we're gonna have 3 guests. We will having one more, but he got sick unfortunately, so he won't be able to join us. So Ben already introduced himself. I'm Yulia, I'm artist, fashion designer. I'm working as a NFT creative lead on a social impact project, Open Art, and I'm here doing this guild. So yeah, let's give all our guests introduce themselves. So let's start with Paul.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you, Yulia, for the introduction. So I'm Paul. I also am a Kernel Fellow and was part of Kernel since the beginning. I would say Kernel's Genesis block, and my interest in NFTs has been as a game developer, I would say. So utility would probably be the if it's going to be a versus battle, I'd take the side of utility. But it's, as Kernel tells us, right, it's not just zeros and ones. So I'm happy to discuss with everyone what I know and learn from all of you as well. Thank you.
Okay,
nice.
Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam. I've been playing in the meta, or what some people call the metaverse, through social VR for about a year and a half, 2 years now. And that's also sent me down the rabbit hole of Web3 and NFTs for about a year or so now. And I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents about what the metaverse may be, I guess.
And
Okay, I wasn't sure how. I'm waiting for your guys' lead.
Yeah, no.
Hi everyone, my name's Ben. My pronouns are they, them. I am a Kernel fellow from KB3, so Kernel Block 3. And I also am the head of community at Wonder, or Wonderverse, which is a Web3 project management software that's currently being built, and I'm running the community there. And I'm excited for this conversation. I have a lot of hot takes on NFTs. And I'm also doing this, I'm growing this kind of mini side project called the Towers 3, which is really just three friends. Actually, we all are Kernel alums. So me, Rachel, and Sean. And we also help build Web3 Baddies, if people know of that group. And we're just trying to get voices that are not typically associated with Web3 out into the ether, to show people that there's more to this than just GigaChads. And there's people thinking critically and thinking in a large scope about what Web3 can become.
I love that. Before we go to the next slide, there's just one more thing that I want to ask of our guests. And humor me for a second, because this is a kind of you see if this makes sense. You can say maybe it doesn't, but I wanted to try and do like a future-facing introduction, because this is like the future of NFTs. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if instead of it's really cool to get people's past and present, understand their experience, understand what they're doing right now. But I think there's a recognition of we're in an incredibly nascent space with a lot of road bumps and volatility. And so a question that I like to ask people is, why do you stay here? Why don't you leave? As opposed to why are you in here? What keeps you in crypto? What do you see as the future that you're trying to build towards? I think it's good framing device for like your intentions in the space, even beyond what you've done and like what you want to see. So if anyone has an answer for that, I'm happy to, you know, hand it over to you. Otherwise, I'm happy to like fill space for you. Okay, Paul's up.
Yeah, maybe I can start. Yeah, because I think that speaks to me, Ben. I've been in the space since 2017. And I guess as a side story also, I've been trying to make NFT utilities since then, 2017, for game developers. Why we started our company was we saw NFTs as a new way of monetization for game developers. And that was what we built our company on in 2017, and no one cared. So crypto winter happened and it crashed. We had to let go of a lot of our employees. We had to soft land them to another company. I was working without a salary for almost a year. So I stayed. But I think the what I really believed in was that the status quo was terrible as a game developer. You couldn't really make money making the things that you want to make. I was a game developer in the Philippines. A lot of the game developers there work for other companies as outsource, or make terrible games for brands or for other CD industries. So so I didn't want that, right? I wanted to make games in a new way. So that's why I stayed. That I think we're still very early on. There's still lots to do with not just NFTs but Web3. So yeah, so in the future, my hope is we build a different way for game developers to make games, and NFTs is just one part of that.
Incredible. I would love to dig more into that, but I also want to give space for N right now to hear their introduction. But Paul, that's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. I think that for me, right, like I think, you know, people can get lost in the sauce a lot of the times with like Web3. And for me, it's really about like building a global economic system that is unbiased and can be tapped into by anyone. And I think my kind of long-term vision is, I don't know, like I've been using this kind of like metaphor of like a guardian angel. I'm not a religious person, but like the idea of a guardian angel is it's like somebody you talk to and they like, you know, give you what you need, right? So I almost think of Web3 like an economic guardian angel that says, what do you need? And then you say, I need money, or I need resources. And it says, here you go. And that kind of taps this like global economic system to this local economic system and allows for this almost like mutual aid exchange of value to wherever people need it. So it's like, you know, a guardian angel, and it's not a judgmental entity where it's like, why do you need this, or who gives you the right to need this? It says, okay. And yeah, it's like kind of like this, the kind of connection between global community and local community and how those things interplay. So I guess my long-term vision for Web3 is like it almost kind of being in the background, right? And not needing to be this like ever-present force, but a force that's like powerful, but only is there for you when you ask. And then, you know, I kind of take some inspiration from like Calm Technology. I forget the person's name who presented about that, but like just something that is understandable in there, but not in your face. So that's kind of like my, I guess, mission and vision for Web3.
Fire. Economic guardian angel is such an interesting, like, I'm going to digest that one and try and yes and it, but wow, amazing. Adam, do you have some 2 cents you want to share?
Yeah, 3 cents. And that is amazing way of framing it. I think just on that, but it really just picks up what you're saying. I think just this fundamental shift in how we can change the way we share value and rally around content in different ways. I've got a lot of hangups about traditional copyright. Spent a long time working in the music industry, and musicians, as we all know, have had a pretty bum deal generally. And this shift in how we can, approach the act of making and sharing that value is, to me, fundamentally what excites me about Web3, and how that will tie into digital immersive spaces.
There's a lot of I've just been trying to like take notes to try and like draw a common ground, because there's like a new way for game developers to develop games, economic guardian angel, and sharing that. Like there's like a collectivistic, like reducing economic barriers, sort of like building the economic system, like an interesting common ground that I'm trying to see the dots connect. But Yulia, do you want to give me a little bit of your intro? Like, why are you here? Why don't you leave? What are you interested in building towards?
Yeah, I kept thinking about it. I think for me, like I would a bit separate why I'm in crypto and Web3 in general, because of all like the economic incentives and this whole new world we're creating, and why I'm in NFTs specifically. I think if we're talking about NFTs, I came also like as an individual artist and was interested in what you can do as an artist there, but now I'm kind of like interested in technology as a whole, and it feels like this playground where we can build almost anything. So yeah, I'm interested in how we can shift a lot of like existing structures with the help of NFTs. For example, now we're in, like with a company that with our project, we're reimagining social impact, how you can change how like social impact projects are funded and crowdfunded and rallied together, like things like that. How can you change communities and Web3 identities and all this metaverse thing? Like there are so many things. So I feel it's just like it's a beautiful playground for a lot of people now. What about you?
Yeah, no, I love the, and I love the all the metaphors and analogies really helps me to think, because I think playground is a really good framing device, because like scraped knees are a big part of playground. Like there is like a lot of like learning through burning, like there's an experimentation or element of discovery that exists within playgrounds that I think also exists in Web3, where it's like, yeah, like you play as hard as you can and then you learn from your failures sort of energy, which is like, I think kind of interesting. Personally for me, I'm trying to like connect all the dots and give a like an answer that like has a metaphor in it, but I'm just gonna like shoot from the hip. I really decided like this is something I want to like be interested in pretty much for as long as it's in like around, not as long as it's interesting, but the DAO hack exploded my brain, because it was the social consensus that bound people to Ethereum Classic versus Ethereum. And that just like blew my brain, where it's like the power of social consensus and communities like overrides technology. Like when the marginal cost of creating a new protocol is zero, and you can fork and economically incentivize everyone in a network to go to somewhere else. Like you have vampire tax like sushi to uni, like it's crazy what that means for supercharging like groups of people, and like giving them power, like social consensus as a superpower is like amazing to me. And I don't know where it's going to go or what's going to happen from it, but just the idea that like a group of people with shared beliefs is valuable and powerful is incredible to me. So that's my little intro. Does anyone want to say anything before we go to the next slide? Cool. Yeah, sweet. Next slide. So, or no slides. That's also a good one too.
Yeah. that was yours.
Okay, cool. So, I think I do have this actually in. I made it in a slide thing, but you know, I don't have that open right now. But I do have this page open, which is close enough. So I think it's important when we talk that we share definitions, so we're not talking past each other. We share, we're talking about the same things. So like, if we're going to bring up the conversation of art versus utility, what is utility would be interesting to not have, to have some shared definitions. And just a little background about me, I studied economics, thought it was so abstract, never going to be used, but now all of a sudden like everyone's using economics language. So like, lucky me, I guess. I'm using that as a superpower to help some more social consensus or whatever. Anyways, I kind of like shudder when people are like, oh, there's no utility to NFTs because the most broadest definition of economic utility is the perceived value or satisfaction from buying something. And so if you value what you bought, regardless of what it does, that is economic utility. It's just perceived value or satisfaction. And so like we can talk about form utility, which is like the form of the thing you bought satisfies the needs that you want, or place utility, you can use it where you need it. Like brick and mortar is the common example of place utility, or time utility is on demand. I can use it when I want to use it. Like Uber has on-demand cars, or there's information utility, which is like, this helps me, informs me, buy something, or like informs my things. Or literally possession utility is the idea that possessing something is a utility in and of itself. Like owning a Tesla or a Lamborghini is a sort of status flex, and there is a utility assigned to the ownership of its thing. But just like giving us like a standard ground to lie on, like I don't know what can't have utility if people value things that they buy. I don't know. That's just like a spicy ground to start the conversation. And you've got your hand raised. What do you, I'm going to bring you.
Yeah, so, and I'm not sure if we're doing hand raising. Let me know what kind of flow you want in this conversation. But I think that like, so I got into Web3 in like late 2019, early 2020, and I got in through NFTs, right? I didn't, like, I was like, you know, I got in through DeFi, not NFTs. And I was like, I remember in KB3, like that was like the big thing. And KB3 was like NFTs. And I was like, man, like I'm not into it. And I just like wasn't into it. And I think it was because I had some prejudgments about a lot of things about like value. What is the utility? What is the value? And I think at that time when I was like really getting involved in DeFi and Web3, I was priced out of ETH L1, right? Like it was, the gas was way too much. I remember it was like probably like $75 a transaction, maybe more. If it was a complex smart contract, you know, even more. So I was completely priced out. So I went to different other, I think call them like third gen L1s like Salo, like Hedera, there's other ones. And at that time, none of those had NFTs on them, right? They were so nascent that like there was no NFTs to buy. So then I kind of just got into DeFi and those ecosystems because that was more evolved, because people went, you know, we were kind of like chain launches, DeFi launches, NFTs launches, right? That was kind of the order. And, you know, but as I kind of like, as I tend to do, question my own belief system, as I can, you know, continue to kind of like question, why do I believe this? I just realized that I'm like, hold on, like, NFTs, the idea of it is quite like decolonial. It's quite, you know, subversive, right? All it is saying is that I value you, so I will give you cold hard ETH for a representation on chain of this picture. And I realized that there was that was such a subversion of like traditional economics, where it's like, why do I have to get something physical or tangible? Why can't I just know that you did this thing and that I am supporting you in this thing? And that really ties into like, you know, just, I don't know, like, why do we have to own things to make them valuable, right? Why can't we just value the people who created them? So I started to become really like bullish on like just NFTs as support, right? NFTs as a moniker of, I supported this person's material needs. I supported this person buying food, paying for rent. Like I started to really use these like concrete things. Like I spent $150 on this NFT. That value is going directly to that person, minus the gas that they used to offboard it, and like centralized exchange fees. And then they can pay their rent. Right, I just stripped it all away, and I was like, what is this transaction at brass tacks? And that's what it was. And like, yeah, go ahead, Ben, I see you're on mute.
Well, I think that's something that's really like a common critique that I am so annoyed of is like, why don't you just get an artist, commission an artist and pay them directly? And there's a difference in the model of telling an artist what to art versus having an artist make something and being able to buy it directly from them.
Exactly. And I started using this metaphor of like all like Web3 NFTs is like a global local art fair, right? And it's actually more accessible than an art fair, right? Because if you think about people with disabilities, folks who, you know, maybe have depression, people who can't drive there, are working 60-hour weeks, you can find an artist you support and say, I don't need to have your physical, tangible art. I can just find you online, support you economically, and then you can continue to like have your needs met and continue to make amazing art. There's a project that like I recently bought. It's called Average Monsters. I can like link it in the chat. And I thought it was so cool because what they did was they basically was like, it's almost like it was like a set person who made like sets for movies and stuff. And it gives me very like Crash Box, if remembers the HBO show, and then like I Spy, very like late 90s, early 2000s, like taking actual pictures of objects. So the artist like created these like different characters, did like 7,000 or something of them, and then took pictures and then put those pictures on chain. And why I was excited by that, I was like, they were able to do their physical art process and then put that on chain, have that, you know, joyous creative experience, and they sold out and made like $1.5 million, right? And that is like a case study in like, why do we have all these hangups on, and I think it's colonial in nature, like all these hangups on like, you need to give me something in order for me to value you, right? You need to give me a tangible thing, something I can own in like I own this, right? That's such a rudimentary emotional need, in my opinion. So I think a more evolved emotional, spiritual kind of experience is, I know that this money is going to somebody who I value, end of it. And they do whatever they want with that. And they can like, you know, create more art, pay their living expenses. So yeah, I don't know, I'm ranting, but like, that is just so, it's like, that is what unlocked for me NFTs. I was like, oh my God, this is a subversion of how we value people.
I love
Maybe
that.
I can add a little bit to that, Ben. Yeah, I agree very strongly with that, and how this new channel allows us to support the artists we love, right? And it's and I guess one thing, maybe just to bring it back a little to the discussion on utility, the how I guess how some people look at it when you say there's no utility here is around the technical utility. So if we look at the smart contract, right? Like there's nothing you can do technically on the smart contract rather than own it, I guess. So that's why when they say that we should build more utility, because a lot of the times when you buy an NFT, that's the only thing you can do with the NFTs, buy and sell and hold and trade, right? So I guess that's how people are looking at utility. But in the other side of the spectrum, I do agree that there already is utility. And one thing that really surprised me around the last few months was that I was trying so hard to build utility on our NFTs, build games around it. And then Bored Ape happened, right? And I was like, oh, do I even need to add utility to these objects when people are already getting them and getting value out of them? So yeah, so something to think about. I do feel that utility, in terms of adding more to the smart contract, there's a lot to do there. As a game developer, that's how I see it. It's like there's this item now, digital item online, that there's so many things we can do, that the sky's the limit. We can code things around it. And something I tell game developers as well is, for a long time we've been creating games to make money, but now we can create money to make games. And I think that goes for art as well, right? Where for a long time we've been creating art to make money, and now we're creating money so we can make our art. So these NFTs are money. So yeah, so that's how I see it.
I'm really interested in like case studies and like loot, where it's like emergent utility, and they didn't actually.
And speaking of loot, sorry for plugging, but the Kernel Gaming Guild later is going to have the Lord of Lore of Loot talking with us later at 11 a.m. EST or 12 p.m. EST. So join us later and let's discuss that.
There you go. I just think it's so interesting when it's like utility is something that's emergent or created in response to perceived satisfaction. I like the ethos of this project. I will create a derivative project that uses, like, I recognize value in this. and utility in this, so I will create utility from this, is like such a crazy progression of like yes-anding. Like it's the process, not the product, that is an NFT, where it's like they're giving you like breadcrumbs to like keep on doing something. It's not like a finalized, actualized, it's a half-baked thing that you invite bakers into the process. It's insane. Yeah, everyone, I see that there's 5 minutes left. I am aware, but we're gonna hop back on this line, and I'll keep on recording so that I'll literally just put the clips together. Sorry about not paying for Zoom. I don't pay for it. But Adam, you're off mute. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just on what you're saying, again, it comes back to this kind of collaborative shared experience and shared ownership of that experience, which to me, again, is just the fundamental of it. But what was for me was interesting is my introduction to NFTs was about a year and a few months ago. A friend in social VR made an avatar, which they sold to the founder of Somnium Space for an Ethereum for 1 ETH. So immediately I was like, holy shit, wow, okay, so you've made this digital item, although that has a lot of utility in that metaverse. But then I went down the rabbit hole of NFTs, and initially there were NFTs that didn't give you ownership of IP, and then that started to get introduced a bit later on last year in the mid-year point. And that's where things really got interesting for me, when that sort of shared ownership came in with the owners of those NFTs.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. Economic utility is perceived satisfaction, which is different than functional, or like functional utility or functionality. Yeah, they're like the egg white is economic utility and the egg yolk is functional utility, in that they're like the same thing, but one is smaller and not the other. If that makes any sense. They're concentric circles. And so that's just why I always push back when people are like, art has no utility. And I'm like, if you bought it and you valued it, like that is literally utility. Like that's all you need.
I think people forget, and like this is what's crazy to me about like economics, business. These are just like emergent biological human processes. Like I don't get like I'm just like I don't get what people like have something up their butt about this stuff. Like people are just like so like why? It's like that's who humans are. Like we value stupid things. We value art. We value community. We value connection. Like these are just like things that our biology dictates us to do, right? Like I know we love to be like, oh, we're such evolved beings. We're not animals. We're something separate. No, we have biology, and our biology dictates like what we do. And it dictates us building cities and doing these things. Like these are emergent human qualities, and so is economics. Like that's an emergent like social human quality. And like when people are like, well, why? I'm like, well, then it's not for you, right? If you don't find the value, then it has no value. But people are finding value and enjoying themselves. So like, you know, I know this is like maybe a controversial example, but like I think a perfect example of this is Disney adults. And I hated Disney adults for so long because I felt challenged by them, right? They challenged me because I was like, why? Like, oh, why would you go to like Disney as an adult? Or why would you be so obsessed with this? It's the same. It's a perfect example of just humans just enjoy things. And then like they buy them and they maybe spend all of their money on enjoying that thing. And that's not my place to value and to judge what they are doing. Right, that is their choice, and that is their perceived like economic utility. So like, so I use Disney adults because I think it pushes us to be like, because I know that's controversial, at least in the United States, like people like have opinions on Disney adults, and like, but I have realized that like they are the perfect case study of like who we are as humans, and you know, just like we do things because we find value in them, and it's like as simple as that. Like it's really quite simple, and like. That then emerges economy, that emerges like value transfer, and all these things that we're like doing on Web3. It's just like humans, man.
Okay, so sorry to cut you. We're gonna end very soon, but we're gonna hop right back on this line. Hopefully everyone has the Zoom link. I was gonna say a nuclear take, like one of the spiciest takes, but I feel like if I get cut off, it's gonna be really funny if like everyone just like leaves on that. But my take is that economics is astrology for men. And that actually got me really into astrology, not like to like downgrade astrology, but like to upgrade it to the level of economics where they're just belief systems that people buy into and use, and like there's sufficient inertia in mass in people believing them that they become belief. By the way, sorry. Boom. Okay, sorry.
Well,
We're talking
yeah.
about the war zone.
Yeah, so I was saying that Venkatesh Rao wrote something around lore, right? And how some of the people in Web3 are doing it very well, like Kay, right? And Gnosis. So I think you're very right. Like economics is astrology, and now like Web3, the people who understand it know it's all about the lore. It's how do you make people think a certain way, right? How do you make them believe in your community? So yeah, so that's something I've been thinking about a lot as well, like NFTs, right? Like the Bored Ape NFT. There's no utility, there's no technical utility for them, but they created a movement of these people becoming apes. If you went to NFT NYC, there were people acting like apes, right? So what was that about? That NFT was so strong, that culture around that NFT was so strong that it affected their behavior. So yeah, so I don't think it's a stretch to talk about astrology and Web3 and NFTs, because there's definitely a thread there, right?
Yeah, sorry, just quickly to what you're saying, and I think, there's a reason why people are pushing back and they question why, and it's because there's been an uneven distribution of wealth globally, and it still is, and so people are fearful of things like this, and it's just Web3 generally is not getting a great, as we all know, a great coverage in the mainstream media, and that's where most people get their news, and they're fearful of this the commodification of everything and this idea of attributing money to everything, and they're not seeing the sort of more inherent, deeper promise and value that comes from this sort of world that Kernel preaches, which I think is so valuable. But yeah, and I understand there's a fear. A lot of my friends think I'm crazy. I'm in my mid-40s and I've come into this in the last 3 years, and I totally get it. And they think I'm flirting with the devil constantly. And it's I know there's so much more to this.
Yeah, just want to introduce like a future question, since we're talking about like Bored Apes and all the stuff. Like this is true that Bored Apes started with like the only value and utility was the community, but right now they started introducing all of this gaming aspect, metaverse land, like they dropped the coin. And I feel there is a little bit of pressure on a lot of projects that they need to do something for the metaverse. They need to do like 3D avatars, they need to introduce token, they introduce land. So in a way that everybody started with art, but now everybody's like, okay, we need to introduce this utility, and somehow NFTs are started merging with gaming and with DAOs, with DeFi. And I'm curious, like, do you think this trend will continue to go on, like this pressure, or will it be like, separating, okay, this is the gaming space and this is the pure art space, or will it always be like, or not always, but I mean, will the trend continue of trying to add more and more of this into the what used to be just art?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that, Yulia. Yeah, I just think that, like, I don't know. I just think I keep going to getting lost in the sauce, right? Like, I'm not sure we need to have delineated definitions. Like, I don't, at least for myself, I don't see the value in like, because like someone's gonna come along and like create an NFT game. Okay, I love that for them, right? Someone's gonna come along and be like, I only want to do art. I love that for them, right? Like these things are not oppositional forces, right? Like they're not opposing. They're just like things that nebulously exist and people are doing them. And like, as long as there's someone who it speaks to personally, then there's a market or there's a value. And yeah, and I'm very anti-roadmap, right? I think roadmap kind of goes to like what Adam's saying of like this commodification of everything, where it's like, I have to prove to you that this is valuable and that there's some long-term mission and vision. It's like, let's chill, like let's just like drop an NFT, see what happens, like to what Ben you're saying, like this emergence, right? Like loot, like someone did something and then everyone started building on that, right? Emergent community building, emergent like utility creation. And I don't know, I think people's fears of Web3 are actually just critiques of our current system. I always go back to that, right? Like people are projecting, and like humans are projectors, me included, but people are projecting the realities of the current dystopian world we're living in onto Web3, and they're like, oh my God, but like you're gonna commodify everything. It's like, bro, fiat currency is crypto. Like, it's not different. Like, it's just the social power of government, right, backing a thing that's not backed by anything, right? So it's like this idea that we're not already in this dystopian thing people are viewing as Web3 is like, again, we pay for rent, we pay for food, we pay for, everything is commodified. So so when people come at me with those type of views, Adam, I go back to them, I'm like, is that not just our world, right? And are we not then trying to maybe take that centralized power and distribute it? Like, because if I close my bank, and I think about this a lot, if I close my bank account, I use Citizens Bank in the United States. If I close my bank account with them and then only use crypto, which I have not done, and I don't recommend people do, I don't think it's advanced enough for that yet. But if I did that, banks have no power, right? Like, so I don't think people understand that, like, there's a chance we have here for NFTs, Web3, DeFi, all these things to actually subvert systems of power and financialization rather than embolden them. Because now the utility is like, we all use this economic rail system, and then I can just send 1 ETH to someone in the Philippines, or I can send 1 ETH to someone in Peru. Like, I can distribute my value immensely more effectively than I could previously, right? So like, I understand people's fears, but I like don't see the data for that fear, right? And like, while emotions are valid, like I like to be data driven, right? Like, well, what's the on the ground, what's happening? And like, it's just, we already live in that system. We already live in a system where there's an unequal wealth distribution, where it's like worse than like, pre-revolution France. Like, it's like, we're already there. Like, we're already in the dystopia. And like, I don't know. So people acting like, oh, Web3 is going to somehow make it worse. I'm very critical of that perspective.
There's like a really good tweet that I don't like, it said it better than I can right now, but it was like, hyper financialization is a way to give people more equity and more stake and ownership in the things that they do. We already live in a world that commodifies everything. Giving people more tools for ownership will increase their like economic power. Like, it's just that simple. Like, if they are doing things and they're not receiving anything in return, like, there's someone that's capturing that value elsewhere. And so by giving people direct ownership over their labor, it's like, that's so powerful. And like, the response to be like, oh, we're hyper financializing, like, yeah, we're giving people more equity in stake in the things that they do. Isn't that like a good thing? Maybe. Just like, I agree with what En said, where it's like, a lot of critiques about Web3 are necessarily about the context that it's understood within, because you can't divorce technology from its culture. Like, we are a subculture of a larger culture, and so we are reflected into that larger culture. Those values aren't separate, but they're like distilled and like, if anything, like still present. And so, I don't think that the hyper financialization is a bad thing. If anything, is probably a good thing, and a way to give people more equity in the things they do.
I guess one thing I would want to ask everyone also, Ben, is I think as a game developer, I see a lot of game developers angry at Web3. So, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. It's the hyper financialization. We saw what happened. As game developers, we've seen games become so financialized. So I understand the fear. And something I always think about is, how do I help them understand that this is what we are thinking about here, right? If they just get to talk to people like you, like Adam, like everyone, they'll see that this isn't really about extracting. It's about us building ownership, as you mentioned. It's about owning labor. It's about giving more power to labor rather than having platforms control the means of production, right? So that's just sharing. That's something I've been thinking about, really, and I feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle there. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how we can make people understand that more.
Yeah, I think gaming is one of the most controversial space. Like for me, it's just like I used to be a gamer for a couple of years, so it makes so much more sense of owning the assets that you put so much time into. But at the same time, I see so many people like pushing against it because they're afraid that it's gonna ruin the game experience and the fun of it. That it will introduce all the people grinding for just for money and like making it into work. But like I think that in the future, like there is this place for this dialogue of how you can still like how the games can still be fun and at the same time you still own what you put into that.
There's something that's really interesting about how a lot of and I'll pass it to you after this just little bit of an interlude. Like a lot of game is like work in that grinding is a gigantic part of it. And like doing the same stuff to like level up your, like it's the same parallel as like work where you grind and you level up. And that's like a weird abstraction where like people want to do things and see meaningful progress. And so like giving people ways to do that and then economic benefits for that like it just seems like a catalyst and superpower existing behaviors. But and handing it over to you, you've had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just think, so I think of like, proof of work, right? And what is proof of work? Proof of work for a blockchain is just someone doing computational labor, right? Or, someone using code to do that to prove verification of transaction. What's a video game? Like, I feel like they're quite similar entities, right? It's like somebody sitting, play, level up. Someone has to sit there and do it. So like, feels very much like proof of work to me. So like, it's just like there's all these similarities to what we're doing. We're just having different front ends, right? Or they have different back end point. Like people are like pointing different vectors at different locations, right? They're like, oh, validate transactions. Oh, just have fun, right? Like it's just pointing in different directions. And I think that like, again, I just go back to the fear that people have is actually just a fear of what already is. And I think to your point of like, how do we convince people? I've been saying this on Twitter a lot. It's like, we have to build propaganda, right? We have to be the like cultural cornerstones of like not being defensive, right? But being like, not being reactionary, but being like, what is gonna make people feel valued here? Right now, at least in the United States, which is my context, the only thing I can speak about, we have the Great Resignation, we have COVID, we have people sinking into poverty, we have all these different things. We have to connect Web3 to people's materialities, people's lived realities, and make them understand that this is what's going to help you. Like, people are like, I have no rights in my workplace. Well, how about we use Web3 to coordinate union organizations or labor organizing? Like, we have to start connecting the technology to something tangible that people like global unions, exactly, Cairo, like we have to connect what we're doing to something real, right? Because at the end of the day, and that's why I use this guardian angel metaphor for like Web3 economics, because it's like Web3 inherently is ephemeral, right? It's not something you can like grasp. So we have to make that tangible in people's minds and use the metaphors and use narratives. And this is right up your alley, Ben, right? Use narratives and all this stuff to connect it to what people are doing in their day-to-day life. And if we can't do that, people will then create perceptions based on, like you're saying, traditional media and like, the kind of like fear mongering they're doing. Because I believe that rich people are actually afraid of Web3 more than they're like excited by it. Because Web3 is another technological, oh, cute kitty, evolution of what systems we already have, right? It's globalizing it. It's giving Web3 gives me very Star Trek vibes, right? It's like unifying the earth and everyone's on the same financial rails. Everyone's transacting economically in the same location, rather than states and governments controlling what your economic activity looks like.
So one thing that I'll add is I just have this like sort of framework that every scene sets the stage for the anti-scene. And so globalization was the biggest thing maybe like 10 years ago, but we're now in the anti-scene to globalization in that there's populace and there's like increasingly localization as like a response to a hyper-globalized world. And so it's really interesting that I think Web3 is the anti-scene to populism, where it's a new collective version of coordinating global resources at scale. And so it's just like really interesting to see just how society is a response to society is a response to, like, it's all just references and responses all the way down, which I'm happy to just be caught up in it. And like, it'd be like, I'm not going to escape it or exit. I'm no man is an island, you know, like I exist within context, and I'm happy to recognize that context. But I think that a lot of people get afraid of what will be by using it as a proxy for what is, or however N said that in a better way. Like, it's an interesting and enlightening thing to be like, so much can be understood by when we are, even more importantly than like what we're doing or what's going on. Like, there's just so much historical context that bakes in a reason for why what's happening is happening. But I feel like we're all talking in the same directions of like new collective economic systems without barriers to entry, such that we can support people on what they value. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think again, it's you know, when I think why a lot of people who haven't entered the scene or the space or crypto yet in any capacity, a lot of it's got to do, you know, the people who jumped in and bought NFTs at the beginning were people who had crypto and have made a lot of money out of crypto, and it just overinflated the whole thing. And that's partly what's created a lot of problems in this space. It's going to be interesting to see other chains taking, or if L2 happens for ETH, the merge, or you know, if Solana gains more traction and people, because you know, it's a much more affordable way to enter the space. So the main thing is, at the moment, everything anyone reads about in the press is, you know, Bored Apes and celebrities flipping these things and flexing the value proposition of these NFTs, as opposed to looking at what else is possible with the technology.
Yeah, I had the theory that, like, somebody said that in the future, like, everybody will be using NFTs, but maybe they would be like called differently, and people won't even realize that it's NFT, that maybe it's a good thing to kind of change the name to get away from all these associations. That, like, for example, like tickets to the concerts will be NFTs, but people won't realize that they are like exactly that, because it will be so like mass adopted in a way.
Totally agree. And that goes to what I was saying, Yulia, about like just creating new metaphors, right? Creating new headspaces of how we conceptualize, right? Like, I think wallets is the worst name for what that technology is, right? It's like, it's a portal. And I've been using that word and like shilling it across social media. It's like, it's a portal, right? You don't, like in a wall, I got my wall right here, right? In my wallet, you hold things, like it's actually in the wallet. But that's not what I think a portal is. What a portal is, you look through and see in, right? And that's basically a better metaphor of like, well, I have my, you know, Web3 portal, and my Web3 portal shows me what's on the, you know, ETH L1, Arbitrum, Polygon, Salo, whatever. So you see your assets on chain through the portal, right? So it's like, yes, please credit me because I'm chilling and it's great. I should write an article about it. But anyway, like, again, like, I agree with you, Yulia, that NFTs, what the heck are you talking about, right? What is that? No one gets it. But if you use, hey, this is your ticket, or this is your portal, you can even use portal for NFTs, right? This is your portal to something, right? Then people start understanding, oh, I buy this and I get access, or I get, you know, I get art or whatever. It just, we have to, like, again, this tech bro language, I'm like, it is used as gatekeeping, not as welcoming, right? It's like non-fungible token. No one even knows what non-fungible is. What is a token, right? The whole word makes no sense. And I'll say it very, very plainly. It makes no sense. So like, I am like, okay, we need better language. We need better words. We need better metaphors. And that's on us, right? Us here. Us in this space, us in kernel, us in Web3, it's on us to just create, right? I made up portals in Web3 values with a few people because I was like, we need a better word. What words make more sense? And I just created it and I started talking about it. What DAOs is a great example. What is a DAO? I am like, this is off the NFT subject, but like, again, these are all just words people made up like 5 years ago, maybe less. So we have the autonomy to say, forget it. We're going to use different words, and I'm going to use this word, and then I'm going to show this word, and then I'm going to see if I can get it adopted, which is, again, that propaganda machine I was talking about.
So Glenn had a good question. Do you want to speak to it? Make it we only have like a couple. Oh, it's actually 9 o'clock. So if
Very
you have
quickly.
things that you have to go, feel free to leave, because I understand that, especially for our speakers, we told you it's an hour, and I don't want to take your time because I value your time. But there's kind of an interesting question about, like, are we building something new, or are we just building more equitable capitalism? And I don't know. That's a spicy take.
I've been thinking about that a lot as well, right? Like honestly, we're in a capitalist system, right? So we're all moving through that, and and I see that also with games and NFTs, like play to earn, right? So why play to earn happened, is there's a system that enables it. So yeah, my thinking is at least now with Web3 and with these new economic systems that we're trying to do. I guess it goes back to let's create money. Of course, I credit Andy for that. He was the one who kind of made me think that we're here to, like, kernel is all about the creation of money, right? Allowing people to play around with money, and maybe that's how we go about it. We try to build these systems in as experimental and as playfully as possible, in a space where no one gets hurt, right? And then we kind of try to bridge that to the systems that we are currently living in. I would say we're all in a capitalist system. I don't think we can change that really quickly, but we can do these little experiments to try and move the needle.
It's honestly like using, like, there's the line, you can't destroy the master's tools with the master's, you can't destroy the master's house with the master's tools, but we are sort of using the forces of capitalism against capitalism, where we're creating a free market for people to participate in that is separate from the larger capitalist economic market. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy. Okay, Anne, off to you.
I think, Adam, you can go first if you want to. If you
No, I think Glenn, who raised the question, might have something to. That's what I was going to push for.
I guess one other, I know we're all capitalist subjects, and we're within this world, and we're going to have to do what we need to do. But I do think there's an opportunity here, and I think this is something I often get from Andy's talks too. Is like how do we pull ourselves a little bit more towards something else? And like one thing that I thought that just popped into my head is that, like, I don't know if anybody collects like art on Tezos at all, like the Hicket Monk community. And I think there's something really interesting about this, like, just artists kind of fucking around for each other and creating and collecting. And I felt some kind of shift there of like, there's always these two buckets of like, what have you created and what have you collected? And I wonder how we just push more and more attention to the created piece and less to the collected piece, and how that might happen. So there's a lot of things to solve. Obviously, we're not going to solve them all, but I think at least like continuing to have that pulling on our head the other direction is probably a good angel to listen to.
Yeah, and to add to that, Glenn, like I think we're, like, at least I in the United States am used to like consumption, right? And I think I'm not used to production. And I think Web3 offers a really interesting thing of like, do you want to produce? Right? It's a very simple question, but it's like, do you want to? And like, I have found like the answer is yes. And I think for most humans, the answer is yes, I want to produce, right? I don't just want to consume, I want to produce and then have someone else produce, and like it's like a chain of production, right? It's like I want just to have this, like it's like it starts to get this the machine metaphor of like chugga, right? Like that's humans, right? That's very human, I think, to want to like create economy, as like we were talking about earlier. And I actually have been starting to disagree with the tools of the master won't dismantle the house. And I mean, this is a hot take, but like, because I know, like, iconic Black woman said it, and dare I go against them? But I really started to believe that, like, it's a good place to enter, but it's not the final location, because things are more complicated than that, right? Like, you need people who understand the system, you need people who want to dismantle the system, you need like all these different forces that need to align in order to then supplant the system. So for me, like, I think that the tools can like show you how things were built, but in order to like understand how things were built and then understand how to like, dismantle it, you have to know like, well, what's the infrastructure like? What built these pipes, right? What built this like, facade, right? Like how did this thing get put together? And then you understand the weak spots, right? You understand the weaknesses, and then you can say, okay, can I build a new tool based on my understanding of those weaknesses, right? And for me, that's Web3, right? Web3 is the perfect tool, the new tool that exposes the weaknesses of the system and then can like shatter it down. But like we say, the system, the revolution will not be televised. Everyone always says that. But I think what I didn't recognize in myself is we are living that right now, right? How many people are on this call? Like 15, right? We're globally distributed. I think we're around the world potentially. Like it's us, guys. Like it's us. We're the ones doing it. And like, even though it seems like not impressive, at least this is my judgment of myself, it's not impressive. Or like, what am I doing? Or like, what's happening? It's literally us doing it now, and us having these conversations, and us understanding the system, and us understanding Web3. Like, I just can't believe that it's us doing this stuff right now. We are the revolution not being televised.
Yeah.
Fire. Glenn, is there anything you wanted to add? I saw you came off mute.
I just lost it. But the I think part of I'm definitely thinking similarly, that there's a lot of positive to going this way. It reminds me of this feeling of all the friends in college that went into like investment banking right after college and said like, oh, I need to figure out how the system works things, and then like it turns out that also changes you, and like that. And I think that's the thing here, where I think we all have that same objective. I just like wonder, as we go, especially as we've seen where the NFT space is going, and just the mass speculative and financialization of everything, is this changing the way of even how we think about what NFT projects are or can be? And are we starting to create that narrative? And I know that narrative is only going to be accentuated by whatever the large incumbents do. Like, what does Facebook say the metaverse and NFTs are is going to be more determinative of what we do than a lot of, we're trying to build a kind of a counter narrative in some ways. And I wonder what more we can do to build a counter narrative around those things. But I think we're all kind of targeting the same thing. And I'm certainly excited about all the kind of, empowering creators. And that's obviously what I'm building. But I think, I definitely have these things in the back of my head saying like, oh, it's this, why will this be different? Why won't the people that get money and power in this system find new ways to make sure those systems maintain that money and power?
Honestly, I always think of a Scanner Darkly. I don't know if you guys have read or seen that movie, but I think of this as like my go-to metaphor by like, don't get corrupted by the force you're trying to change, because it's like I think he's an undercover cop that goes into a drug ring, but then he becomes an addict and he forgets that he's an undercover cop. And it's sort of like the like psychological bending of like, what are his incentives? What are his mission? Like, what is he doing? Keanu Reeves in like a weird animated, it's a cool movie, but I often think about that, where it's like, when you go in to change something, but you like submit to that thing, like you also get changed by it. And so like, there's like this darkness that you have to, I don't know. And I'm going to hand it off to you because I don't have a real thought there.
Yeah, well, I really want to be critical of this narrative like that we're talking about, because like, I think of this in my own context, right? I am like a queer Black person, right? I always talk about my identity because it's important. When in time was I going to be able to be in this position of leadership in any context of my lived experience, right? Women, right? Black women, queer women, trans women, like all these people, right? So my counterpoint to you, Glenn, is that we are not in the same time. It's like, it might be like, it's like, I think of like a coil of like DNA, right? It's like, we might be on one of the same axes, but we're moved up, right? So things are the same, maybe on the X and Y, but they're different on the Z. So I'm sorry if that goes over people's heads with math, but like, 3-dimensional coordinates, right? But like, we're on a different Z, we're higher up. And for me, my father was an electrical engineer, right? He was the only Black person. He was building like telecom, like Web 1. And like he, by being in the system, became very like, had a lot of internalized racism and all this stuff. I say all this to say that like, we're not in the same time, right? Who built Web 2, at least in the United States? It was like cishet white men, right? That was the whole space. So that space reflects their mentalities, right? Right now, Web 3 is infinitely more global, infinitely more diverse than Web 2 origination ever was. And I think that that is saying something about changes. And to undermine that data point is like something we shouldn't do, because it is different. It's almost like, I think of it like, that's in my back, I have a degree in chemistry. So I think of it like, if you have like a reaction plot and you put 3 things in, you expect a reaction, right? Okay, it's gonna make this compound. Oopsies, I dropped another thing in. It is a false presumption to assume it's gonna create the same compound. It might, but it also might not, right? So we're living in that point of like superposition right now, of like Schrodinger's cat, like, is it dead, is it not, right? And it's on us as individuals to dictate what we want to see that be. And I want the cat alive, right? Because cats are cute and I love them. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like, we're in a superposition, we're in a super state. So we get to decide what that state will be and then do it, right? And then just say, okay, I think it's gonna be this compound, and let me make a hypothesis and collect data on why I think it's gonna be that compound. And then if I'm wrong, and that's it. But I don't think I'm gonna be wrong. So that's kind of like my kind of like throwback to you, Glenn, is just like, there's different pieces in this reaction now, and it's not the same as it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah, and to be clear, I'm in violent agreement with that. I think often when I'm asked, like when my wife asked me, like, what is, there's been this excitement before about different technologies and what they can do and how they might change things. And certainly we've had the techno-optimism before of what we think it'll do with Web 1, with Web 2, and like I think I agree with you that I think it's different, but that question still gets me, where I still worry about it. And so I think in these kind of conversations, I'm glad we're talking about it, because I think it's important. Yeah, but I think overall, I'm definitely like, yeah, very much on the same thread, but this is something that definitely worries me, and why I bring it up.
Yeah, I also agree that this like permissionlessness of this space kind of like gives more opportunities than ever before, because I was thinking that while like when you're getting hired into a Web 2 company or like Web 1 company, like people can look at you and discriminate because of how you look, where you come from, or things like that. But nobody can stop me from going on a blockchain and buying the NFT I like, or doing like, or executing smart contract. There is nobody who will tell me, no, you can't do this because you're like from this country and because you're a woman or whatever. So this goes a long way. Although like recently there was this case when they blocked Iranian artists on OpenSea, which I think is quite an alarming thing, but hopefully we can move past that and arrive to a truly decentralized marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to the centralized, decentralized thing we're living in right now, which is problematic. It's interesting, the Iranian thing, because that's to do with American sanctions, I believe. I've met people in social VR who are devs in Iran who have to use VPNs to hide their identities so they can carry on building virtual spaces. You know, it's terrible.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like the promise of Web3, because like something that I get really frustrated by is like the whole like response to Russia, where they're like, the entire country is going to use crypto to evade sanctions. And it's like, crypto really empowers individuals, but there's not enough liquidity for $680 billion to evade sanctions. Like, I don't know if that's hard to share that thought, but it's like, it empowers individuals, and individuals that want to like not deal with the fear of like their ruble disappearing or like whatever economic system that's falling apart. Like it is a response to that economic system that they have another economic system. But I don't think it's big enough for like countries to like to evade sanctions. So I don't know. I just, yeah, I get frustrated with that narrative as well. So okay, let's do, because I have like 4 or 5 minutes left. I don't want to do like a closing statement because I feel like that's too legal, but like any closing thoughts or like put a bow on it energy where it's like I don't know, or like not even questions, but like, you know, I learned this, or okay, cool. And thank you for saving.
Yeah, of course. lifeline. No, I want to put like just wrap up what I feel, and like I want to give props to Glenn for admitting fear, right, or admitting uncertainty. I think that's a step in the right, like emotionally functional direction for all of us. I feel imposter syndrome near constant, right? I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? I like am online all the time, and I'm like getting paid a lot of money and doing something. I feel imposter syndrome all the time. And why I say that is because like I just like I'm living my life, and I'm seeing, and I'm just letting my heart guide me, and my intuition guide me, my ancestors guide me in the way that I want to go. And like that happened to be Web3. So I'm choosing to say, I believe that this is for a reason. And that is a belief, right? And, you know, someone could say, well, that's stupid. And I could say, well, it is a belief. So for me, I try to calm my uncertainty and my fear, because I'm a very like safety driven person, to just say, it's a belief and you're trusting yourself. I'm trusting myself. So like, let's just see what happens.
Absolutely, I agree with all of that. For me, it's yeah, it's just impossible to ignore what's happening right now, and I just need to be part of this conversation. It's like a complete sort of new life for me, to be honest with you, because I'm at that midpoint in my life, and it's like it's very fucking exciting, to put it bluntly. And one other thing, Ben, can we just talk about this? Is this like a combo of jazz hands and mind blown, or just sort of gospel hysteria?
It's the deaf community's applause.
Oh right, sorry, God.
And so it's how I can unmute show that I'm supporting something.
No, I like it.
There you go. Jazz hands also is just like, that's amazing. It's got me jazz handing. But there is a reason that it exists. Paul.
Oh, yeah, no, I think everyone put it better than I would. So, but I just would like to thank Ben and everyone, right? I think it's these spaces that allow us to really figure out what we need to do. So thank you, Glenn, for saying that. Also, I face that fear also constantly all the time. So just being just conspiring with you guys just really makes me feel a lot of energy, and makes me believe in what I do as well.
It's very recharging to have these conversations, because when I talk to other people, they're not as like yes and energy. And so it's nice to be like critical of what's happening, but also like supportive of each other's thoughts. And that's a space that's hard to find, that I'm happy that we established. And I'm really happy for Colonel for doing that as well. Yulia, we got a minute left. Is there anything you want to say before we close?
Yeah, like I really enjoyed all this conversation, and yeah, like having the space to share it. Like in general about the future of NFTs, what I want to say is like, I do believe that, you know, what 6529 saying is like, corporations are coming to steal our specs and our memes. And yes, they will build their own world, but I think there are still, like, we're still early enough to build what we want to see ourselves. So it's just like, it's this unique space where you can still create what you want to see. So that's me.
Yeah, Salim, tweet that, and then we'll retweet that. And then also follow us all on Twitter, because it's like our clout machine. So we need that clout. No, but thank you so much for all coming today. This was the Culture Guild, and I hope that we did culture or made it a guild. I don't know. I hope it was fun for you, because it was really fun for me. And that mutualism of like shared value and exchange